The arrival. The night sky above New Orleans erupted in a brilliant flash of blue light. To most, it appeared to be nothing more than an unusually bright shooting star, a fleeting moment of celestial beauty. But for Dr. Elias Reeves, hunched over his telescope on the balcony of his cramped apartment, it was something far more extraordinary. Elias watched in awe as the object, clearly not a meteor, changed course mid-flight. It veered sharply, descending rapidly towards the outskirts of the city. His heart raced as he grabbed his jacket and car keys. Whatever this was, he had to see it up close. As Elias sped through the quiet streets, his mind reeled with possibilities. Could this be the moment he'd been waiting for his entire career? The vindication of years of ridicule from his peers in the scientific community. He arrived at the edge of the Barataria Preserve just as the first hints of dawn began to color the sky. The swamp was shrouded in mist, but Elias could make out a faint glow emanating from deep within the trees. He grabbed his flashlight and plunged into the undergrowth, heedless of the mud sucking at his shoes. After what felt like hours of stumbling through the swamp, Elias broke through into a small clearing. There, half submerged in the murky water, lay a sleek silver craft no larger than a car. Steam hissed from its surface as it cooled in the damp air. Elias approached cautiously, his scientific curiosity warring with a very human sense of fear. As he drew closer, a panel on the side of the craft slid open with a soft hiss. Elias froze, his flashlight beam fixed on the opening. A small, delicate hand emerged, followed by a figure that was unmistakably not human. The being was slight, no taller than a child, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Its large, almond-shaped eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the gloom of the swamp. Elias stood transfixed as the alien took a tentative step forward, then promptly collapsed into the mud. Without thinking, he rushed forward to help. As he cradled the alien's surprisingly light form, he noticed angry red welts forming on its skin where it had contacted the muddy water. "It's okay," Elias murmured, though he knew the alien couldn't understand him. "I've got you. You're safe." The alien's eyes, a swirling mix of silver and violet, locked onto Elias's face. A look of relief washed over its delicate features before it lost consciousness. Elias knew he had to act fast. He couldn't leave the alien here, vulnerable to the harsh environment and the prying eyes of others who might not have its best interests at heart. With a grunt of effort, he lifted the alien and began the arduous trek back to his car. As he drove back to the city, the unconscious alien wrapped in his jacket in the backseat, Elias's mind raced. Who was this being? Where had it come from? And most importantly, what should he do now? He couldn't take it to a hospital. That would cause panic and attract unwanted attention. His own small lab at the university wasn't equipped to deal with an alien life form. There was only one place he could go: home. Elias lived in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a space that served as both his home and his private research facility. It was here that he conducted his more unconventional studies, away from the scrutiny of his academic peers. As he carried the alien inside, he couldn't help but marvel at the turn his life had taken. Just hours ago, he had been Dr. Elias Reeves, the laughingstock of the astrophysics department, the man who stubbornly clung to the belief that we were not alone in the universe. Now, he was perhaps the first human in history to make contact with an extraterrestrial being. He gently laid the alien on his examination table, rigging up a makeshift clean room with plastic sheeting to protect it from potential Earth pathogens. As he worked to stabilize his unexpected guest, treating the welts that had formed from its contact with the swamp water, Elias noticed something that made his breath catch in his throat. The alien was wearing what appeared to be a thin metallic bracelet. As he leaned in for a closer look, the bracelet suddenly projected a holographic image into the air. It showed a planet, beautiful and blue-green like Earth, surrounded by massive ships of some kind. As Elias watched, the ships opened fire, raining destruction upon the planet's surface. The image flickered and died, but its meaning was clear. This being wasn't just a visitor, it was a refugee. And whatever force had destroyed its home might very well have Earth in its sights next. Elias slumped into a chair, the weight of this realization settling heavily upon him. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, irrefutable proof of extraterrestrial life. But now that it was here, he felt only a profound sense of responsibility and more than a little fear. He looked at the alien's face, peaceful now in unconsciousness, and made a decision. He would protect this being, learn from it, and together they would find a way to warn humanity of the danger that might be coming. But first, he had to make sure his guests survived the night. As the sun rose over New Orleans, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Elias Reeves began the most important work of his life. He had no idea of the challenges that lay ahead, the dangers they would face, or the way this encounter would change not just his life, but the fate of two worlds. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The universe had placed its trust in him, and he would not let it down. Little did Elias know that across the city, reports were already starting to circulate about strange lights in the sky and unusual activity in the Barataria Preserve. The clock was ticking, and the world as he knew it was about to change forever. As Elias worked tirelessly to stabilize his alien guest, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. He glanced at the alien's delicate features, marveling at how something so foreign could also seem so vulnerable and in need of protection. "Don't worry," he whispered, though he knew the alien couldn't understand him. "I'll keep you safe. Whatever brought you here, whatever's coming, we'll face it together." With renewed determination, Elias turned back to his work. The sun climbed higher in the sky, heralding the dawn of a new era for humanity, one that would test their compassion, their ingenuity, and their courage in ways they could never have imagined. Building trust. As the alien slowly regained consciousness, Elias found himself holding his breath. The being's eyes fluttered open, swirling pools of silver and violet that seemed to look right through him. For a moment, they stared at each other in mutual fascination. Then the alien tried to sit up and immediately winced in pain. Elias gently pressed a hand to its shoulder, encouraging it to lie back down. To his surprise, the alien didn't resist. Instead, it looked at him with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude and wariness. "It's okay," Elias said softly, trying to keep his voice calm and soothing. "You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien tilted its head, clearly not understanding the words but seeming to grasp their intent. It raised a delicate hand, pointing to itself, and made a series of melodic sounds. "Zyra," it repeated, tapping its chest. Elias's eyes widened in realization. "Zyra," he echoed, then pointed to himself. "Elias." A small smile curved Zyra's lips, and Elias felt a surge of excitement. This was communication, the first step towards understanding. Over the next few days, Elias worked tirelessly to help Zyra recover and to bridge the gap between their two species. He created a makeshift language program on his computer, using images and simple words to build a common vocabulary. Zyra proved to be an incredibly quick learner, absorbing English at an astonishing rate. As Zyra's grasp of the language improved, she, for Elias had come to understand that Zyra's species had concepts of gender similar to humans, began to share her story. She came from a planet called Lyra, a peaceful world that had been invaded by a warlike species known as the Krell. The Krell sought to strip Lyra of its resources, caring nothing for the destruction they left in their wake. Zyra had been part of a desperate mission to seek help from other civilizations, but her ship had been damaged in an attack, sending her off course and crash-landing on Earth. The holographic message Elias had seen was a warning. The Krell were expanding their territory, and Earth could be their next target. As Elias absorbed this information, he felt a mix of awe and terror. The universe was vaster and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. But he also felt a fierce determination. Humanity needed to know about this threat, needed to prepare. We have to warn them, Elias said, pacing the room. The governments, the scientific community, they need to know what's coming. Zyra's expression turned sad. Will they believe you? She asked, her accent lilting but her words clear. My people did not believe the first warnings of the Krell. We were too comfortable in our peace, too certain of our solitude in the universe. By the time we understood the danger, it was almost too late. Elias paused, the weight of her words sinking in. He thought about his own experiences, the ridicule he'd faced for his beliefs about extraterrestrial life. Would anyone believe him now, even with Zyra as proof? I don't know, he admitted, but we have to try. Their first attempts to reach out did not go well. Elias contacted colleagues in the scientific community, only to be laughed off or accused of perpetrating an elaborate hoax. He tried to approach local government officials, but was dismissed as a crackpot. Even when he managed to get Zyra on video calls, people assumed it was some kind of advanced special effect or costume. As days turned into weeks, Elias grew increasingly frustrated. But Zyra remained patient, her quiet strength a constant source of support. Your people are not so different from mine, she said one evening as they sat on Elias's balcony, looking up at the stars. They fear what they do not understand, but they are also capable of great kindness and courage. You have shown me that. Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Despite the dire circumstances that had brought them together, he had come to treasure these moments with Zyra, her perspective on humanity, at once alien and deeply insightful, never failed to fascinate him. But their peaceful coexistence was about to be shattered. One morning, as Elias returned from a supply run, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street from his warehouse. As he watched, two men in dark suits emerged, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses as they surveyed the area. Elias's heart began to race. Somehow, someone had found out about Zyra. He didn't know if these men were from the government, the military, or some shadowy organization, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let them get to her. He parked a block away and snuck in through the back entrance. Zyra was in the main room, engrossed in a book about Earth's history. She looked up as Elias burst in, immediately sensing his distress. We have to go, Elias said, already moving to gather their essential supplies. Someone knows you're here. It's not safe anymore. Zyra nodded, her face set in determination. Within minutes, they had packed a bag with food, water, and the portable versions of Elias's research equipment. As they slipped out the back door, Elias heard the sound of his front door being broken down. They ran through back alleys and side streets, Zyra's slight form hidden beneath a hooded jacket. Elias's mind raced, trying to figure out their next move. They needed a safe place to hide. Somewhere, they could regroup and plan their next steps. As they turned a corner, they nearly ran into a young woman. She stumbled back, her eyes widening as she caught a glimpse of Zyra's face beneath the hood. But instead of screaming or running away, she simply stared for a moment, then made a decision. This way, she said, gesturing for them to follow her. I know somewhere you can hide. Elias hesitated, but the sound of pursuit from behind made the decision for him. He nodded, and they followed the woman down a narrow alley and into a hidden doorway. As the door closed behind them, plunging them into darkness, Elias couldn't help but wonder, had they just found an ally or walked into a trap? Either way, there was no turning back now. Their journey was only beginning, and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The young woman led them down a narrow staircase into what appeared to be an old speakeasy, long abandoned and forgotten by the world above. Dust-covered tables and chairs were scattered around the room, and old posters peeled from the walls. My name's Maya, the woman said, turning to face them. And I'm guessing you two could use some help. Elias and Zyra exchanged a look. This was a pivotal moment. They could either trust this stranger or try to make it on their own. Zyra gave a small nod, and Elias made his decision. "I'm Elias," he said, then gestured to his companion. "And this is Zyra. She's not from around here." Maya's eyes widened as Zyra lowered her hood, revealing her alien features. But to her credit, she didn't flinch or run. Instead, a slow smile spread across her face. "I knew it," she breathed. "I always knew we weren't alone." As they settled into the hidden sanctuary, Maya explained that she was part of a small but dedicated group of believers, people who had been watching the skies and preparing for the possibility of extraterrestrial contact. They called themselves the Stargazers. "We've been monitoring unusual activity for years," Maya said. "The light show when Zira arrived, the government's sudden interest in that area. We knew something big was happening. When I saw you two running, I took a chance." For the first time in weeks, Elias felt a glimmer of hope. Here, finally, were people who might believe their warning about the Krell. With the help of the Stargazers, they might have a chance of preparing humanity for what was coming. But as Maya began to outline the resources and connections her group had, a new worry gnawed at Elias. He glanced at Zira, who was listening intently to Maya's plans. In the short time they'd known each other, Elias had come to care deeply for the alien refugee. The thought of losing her, whether to the government or to the looming threat of the Krell, filled him with a dread he couldn't quite explain. As if sensing his gaze, Zyra turned to look at him. Her silver-violet eyes met his, and she gave him a small, reassuring smile. In that moment, Elias made a silent vow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they might face, he would stand by Zyra's side. Together, they would find a way to save not just Earth, but Zyra's homeworld as well. The universe had brought them together for a reason. Now it was up to them to make the most of this cosmic chance. The looming threat. The old speakeasy had become a hub of frenetic activity. Maps and star charts covered the walls. Computers hummed with constant data analysis, and the air buzzed with theories and plans. At the center of it all were Elias and Zyra, working tirelessly alongside Maya and the Stargazers to piece together the puzzle of the impending Krell invasion. Zyra's knowledge of Krell tactics and technology proved invaluable. She described their massive warships, capable of laying waste to entire cities in minutes, their energy weapons that could pierce any known defense, their ruthless efficiency in stripping planets of resources, leaving barren husks in their wake. As Elias translated these horrors to the group, he saw faces pale and hands tremble. But to their credit, not one of the Stargazers faltered or suggested giving up. Instead, their resolve seemed to strengthen with each new piece of information. "We need to get this information to people who can actually do something about it," Maya said one evening, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "Military, government, someone with real power and resources." Elias nodded, but his expression was grim. "We've tried that. They either don't believe us or—" He trailed off, remembering the men in black suits who had come for Zyra. "Or they believe just enough to want to capture and study Zyra, rather than work with her," Maya finished for him. The group fell into a tense silence. It was Zyra who broke it, her melodic voice tinged with determination. "Then we must make them listen, not just with words, but with proof they cannot ignore." All eyes turned to her as she stood, her slight frame seeming to radiate strength and purpose. "My ship. It crashed in your swamp, but its long-range sensors may still be functional. If we can retrieve it and activate those sensors, we might be able to detect the Krell fleet's approach." A murmur of excitement ran through the group. Hard data on an approaching alien fleet would be impossible for the authorities to ignore, but retrieving the ship would be incredibly risky. The crash site was likely under heavy surveillance by now. As the Stargazers began to plan the retrieval operation, Elias pulled Zyra aside. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "It's dangerous. If you're captured." Zyra placed a gentle hand on his arm, her touch sending a warmth through him that he'd grown accustomed to but still marveled at. "Elias, my friend, the danger to your world, to all worlds, is far greater than any risk to myself. We must do this." Elias nodded, knowing she was right, but still feeling a knot of fear in his stomach. He'd grown protective of Zira, and the thought of anything happening to her filled him with dread. But he also knew that she was stronger and braver than he'd initially given her credit for. She wasn't just a refugee to be protected. She was a partner in this fight for survival. The retrieval operation was set for the following night. Under the cover of darkness, Elias, Zira, Maya, and 2 other stargazers made their way to the Barataria Preserve. The swamp was eerily quiet, the usual chorus of frogs and insects silenced by an unseen presence. As they neared the crash site, they saw why. The area was cordoned off, surrounded by armed guards and strange equipment that Elias didn't recognize. Zyra's eyes widened as she saw the devices. "Krell technology," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're already here." The realization hit Elias like a physical blow. The government wasn't just investigating a crash. They were actively working with the very aliens that threatened to destroy them. Whether out of ignorance, fear, or misguided attempt at diplomacy, they were playing right into the Krell's hands. Their plan to retrieve the ship was now impossible, but they had stumbled upon something far more crucial: evidence of a Krell presence on Earth and apparent collusion with human authorities. As they retreated from the swamp, narrowly avoiding detection, the gravity of their situation became clear. They weren't just fighting against disbelief anymore. They were up against their own government, which had apparently made some sort of deal with the Krell. Back in the safety of the speakeasy, the group tried to process this new information. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mixture of fear and anger. How could they do this? Maya exploded, pacing the room. "Work with the very aliens that want to strip our planet bare." Zyra's voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her sadness. "It is a tactic the Krell have used before. They offer advanced technology, promise peace and prosperity. By the time the truth is discovered, it's often too late." Elias slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of their task more heavily than ever. "So what do we do now? We can't fight both the Krell and our own government." For a moment, silence reigned. Then one of the younger stargazers spoke up. "We go public," he said, his voice gaining strength as he continued. "We use the internet, social media, everything we have. We tell the world what's really going on." The idea spread through the group like wildfire. It was risky. They'd be exposing themselves to both government retaliation and public ridicule. But it might be their only chance to rally humanity against the true threat. As the stargazers began to plan their information campaign, Elias noticed Zira standing apart, gazing out a small window at the stars above. He joined her, following her gaze to the night sky. "Your home is out there somewhere," he said softly. Zyra nodded, a mix of longing and determination in her eyes. "Yes, and so many other worlds, all under threat from the Krell. Elias, what we do here now, it's not just for Earth, it's for all of them." Elias felt a swell of emotion in his chest: pride, fear, resolve, and something else he wasn't quite ready to name. He took Zira's hand in his, marveling as always at how right it felt despite their differences. "We'll find a way," he promised. "Together." As they stood there, an unlikely pair united by cosmic chance and shared purpose, neither of them could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead. The next few days would test their courage, their ingenuity, and the bonds they had formed in ways they could never have imagined. The information campaign began in earnest the next morning. The stargazers worked around the clock, creating websites, social media accounts, and video content detailing everything they knew about the Krell threat and the government's apparent collusion. Zira's presence was kept hidden for now, but her knowledge formed the backbone of their message. At first, their efforts seemed to disappear into the vast ocean of internet content, but slowly, steadily, people began to take notice. Conspiracy theorists latched onto the government collusion angle. Science fiction fans were drawn in by the detailed descriptions of alien technology, and those who had always suspected humanity wasn't alone in the universe finally felt vindicated. As their message spread, so did the pushback. Government agencies issued denials and dismissals. Mainstream media outlets labeled them as crackpots and fearmongers. But for every voice trying to silence them, there were two more demanding answers. The turning point came 3 days into their campaign. A whistleblower within the military, inspired by the Stargazer's message, leaked classified documents confirming the presence of extraterrestrial technology at multiple sites around the globe. The internet exploded with the news, and suddenly, the world was paying attention. Elias and Zira watched in awe as their small group's efforts snowballed into a global phenomenon. People were waking up to the threat, demanding action from their leaders. But they knew the real battle was yet to come. As the sun set on the 5th day of their campaign, Zira suddenly stiffened, her eyes wide with alarm. "Elias," she said, her voice trembling. "They're here." Before Elias could ask who she meant, the sky outside their window lit up with an otherworldly glow. The Krell invasion had begun, and humanity's time had run out. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and fear. The Stargazers' hideout became a hub of frantic activity as they worked to coordinate with the growing network of believers and activists they'd cultivated over the past few days. Reports flooded in from around the globe. Massive ships appearing in the skies, strange energy readings, panic in the streets. Amidst the chaos, Elias found himself drawn to Zira. She stood in the center of the room, her alien features set in grim determination as she relayed tactical information about the Krell's likely strategies. In that moment, Elias saw her not as the vulnerable refugee he first encountered, but as a warrior, a survivor, and humanity's greatest hope for survival. As dawn broke on a world forever changed, Elias and Zira shared a look of understanding. The real fight was just beginning, and they would face it together. Two beings from different worlds, united in their determination to save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy from the Krell threat. The looming threat had arrived, but humanity, with its unlikely alien ally, was ready to stand and fight. The next chapter of their story would be written in the stars themselves. Race against time. The world had changed overnight. Massive Krell ships loomed in skies across the globe, their ominous presence a constant reminder of the threat humanity faced. Panic-gripped cities, governments scrambled for responses, and in the midst of it all, a small group led by a human scientist and an alien refugee worked tirelessly to give Earth a fighting chance. Elias, Zira, and the Stargazers had become the unexpected center of Earth's resistance. Their hideout, once a forgotten speakeasy, now hummed with activity as people from all walks of life, scientists, soldiers, hackers, and ordinary citizens, came together to fight for their planet's survival. "We need to understand their weaknesses," Elias said, addressing the crowded room. "Zira, you've fought them before. What can you tell us?" Zira stepped forward, her silver-violet eyes scanning the anxious faces around her. "The Krell rely heavily on their advanced technology," she began. "Their personal shielding makes them nearly invulnerable to your current weapons." But she paused, a glimmer of hope in her voice. "Their ships have a flaw." The room fell silent as Zira explained. The Krell ship's power cores were incredibly efficient, but they produced a unique form of radiation. If that radiation could be detected and targeted, it might be possible to overload the cores, disabling or even destroying the ships. "But we don't have anything that can detect that kind of radiation, let alone weaponize it," one of the scientists in the group pointed out. Elias felt a familiar surge of determination. "Then we'll build it," he said firmly. "Zira, can you help us design a detector based on your knowledge of Krell technology?" Zira nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Together, I believe we can do more than that. We can create a weapon." The next few days were a blur of frantic work. Elias and Zira led a team of Earth's brightest minds, combining human ingenuity with Zura's advanced knowledge. They worked around the clock, scrounging for parts, writing complex algorithms, and pushing the boundaries of Earth's technology. As they worked, reports came in from around the world. The Krell had begun their resource extraction, huge machines descending from their ships to bore into the Earth. Resistance was mounting, but conventional weapons were proving useless against the invaders' superior technology. On the third day of non-stop work, Elias found Zura alone in a quiet corner of the lab. She was staring at a holographic display of Earth, red dots indicating Krell extraction sites spreading across its surface like a disease. "We're going to stop them," Elias said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Zira turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. "I hope so, Elias. I couldn't bear to see your world suffer the same fate as mine." In that moment, exhausted and facing impossible odds, Elias did something he'd been wanting to do for weeks. He pulled Zira into a gentle embrace. To his surprise and joy, she returned it, her slender arms wrapping around him. "Whatever happens," Elias whispered, "I'm glad you crashed into my life." Zira's musical laugh was tinged with emotion. "As am I, Elias. As am I." Their moment of peace was interrupted by an excited shout from the lab. They rushed back to find Maya standing over a device that was emitting a soft, pulsing glow. "It works," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The radiation detector works." The success galvanized the team. With renewed energy, they threw themselves into the next phase, weaponizing the detection technology. Zira's knowledge of Krell shielding proved invaluable as they designed a device that could not only detect the radiation from the power cores, but also emit a targeted pulse to overload them. As the weapon took shape, a new challenge emerged: how to deploy it. The device needed to be within a certain range of the Krell ships to be effective, but getting close enough would be nearly impossible. It was a young Air Force pilot, recently joined to their cause, who proposed a solution. "We use their own tactics against them," she said. "A small team, a stealth approach. We get in close under the guise of surrender, then hit them where it hurts." The plan was dangerous, bordering on suicidal. But as they looked at the reports of Krell destruction spreading across the globe, they knew it might be their only chance. Elias volunteered immediately to lead the mission. Zira, to no one's surprise, insisted on joining him. "My knowledge of Krell ships and protocols could mean the difference between success and failure," she argued. No one could deny her logic. As they prepared for the mission, retrofitting a small aircraft with stealth technology and loading it with their experimental weapon, Elias found himself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, certainly, not for himself, but for Zira, for his team, for the entire world, but also a strange sense of exhilaration. This was what he had dreamed of his entire life: proof of extraterrestrial life, the chance to make a difference on a cosmic scale. The night before the mission, Elias couldn't sleep. He found Zira on the roof of their hideout, gazing up at the stars partially obscured by the looming shapes of Krell ships. Having second thoughts, he asked, joining her. Zira shook her head. "No, but I am, reflecting on the strange path that brought me here, on the beauty and resilience of your world and its people." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering in the starlight. "On the connections I've made." Elias felt his heart race. "Zira, She placed a finger gently on his lips, silencing him. "I know, Elias. I feel it too. But let us not speak of it now. Let it be something to fight for, to survive for." Elias nodded, understanding. They stood there in comfortable silence, an alien and a human united by something greater than either of them, watching the stars and drawing strength from each other's presence. As dawn broke, casting an eerie light through the Krell ships that dotted the sky, Elias and Zira made their way to the waiting aircraft. Their team, Maya, the young pilot, and a handful of their most skilled operatives, was already there, faces set with determination. Elias looked at each of them in turn, then at Zira. In her eyes, he saw not just the fate of Earth, but of countless worlds across the galaxy. He thought of all the beings out there, like Zira, who had lost their homes to the Krell. Of all the planets yet untouched, unknowing of the threat that loomed in the dark spaces between stars. As they boarded the aircraft, Elias felt a fierce resolve settle over him. This wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about standing up against cosmic bullies, about proving that even a young, fractious species from a small blue planet could make a difference on a galactic scale. The engines hummed to life, and the aircraft rose silently into the dawn sky. Ahead of them loomed the massive bulk of the Krell mothership, a dark promise of destruction. But within that small Earth craft was something the Krell had never faced before: the combined strength, ingenuity, and determination of humanity, and the knowledge and courage of one remarkable alien who had chosen to stand with them. As they flew towards their destiny, Elias reached out and took Zira's hand. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. The race against time had begun, and failure was not an option. Humanity's finest hour. The small Earth aircraft carrying Elias, Zira, and their team approached the massive Krell mothership. Its dark, angular form blotted out the sky, a looming symbol of the threat facing not just Earth, but countless worlds across the galaxy. "Remember," Elias said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut, "we only get one shot at this. If we can overload their main power core, it should create a chain reaction that'll take out their entire fleet." Zira nodded, her alien features set in determination. "The Krell will be expecting some form of resistance, but they are arrogant. They will not anticipate a threat from such a small craft." As they neared the mothership, their young pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, activated the communication system. "Krell vessel," she announced, her voice betraying no hint of their true intentions. "We approach under a flag of truce. We wish to discuss terms of surrender." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a harsh, guttural voice responded. "Proceed to Docking Bay 7. Any deviation will result in your immediate destruction." Sarah expertly guided their craft towards the indicated bay. As they entered the cavernous space of the Krell ship, Elias felt a moment of awe despite the dire circumstances. The sheer scale of the alien technology surrounding them was breathtaking. "Stay focused," Zira murmured, sensing his distraction. "Remember, beneath all this technology, the Krell are bullies, and bullies can be beaten." As their craft settled onto the docking bay floor, they could see a group of Krell soldiers approaching. The aliens were tall, their bodies covered in armor that seemed to shift and move with each step. Their faces were hidden behind opaque visors, giving them an air of emotionless menace. "Showtime," Maya whispered, her hand hovering over the activation switch for their weapon. The team disembarked, Elias and Zira in the lead. They had decided that seeing Zira might momentarily confuse the Krell, giving them the crucial seconds they needed. As predicted, the Krell soldiers hesitated at the sight of Zira. It was all the opening they needed. "Now," Elias yelled. Maya flipped the switch, and their craft erupted with energy. The pulse weapon they had created sent out waves of targeted radiation, designed to interact with and overload the Krell's power systems. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Krell soldiers raised their weapons, and Elias felt his heart sink. Had they failed? Had all their work, all their sacrifice, been for nothing? Then the air around them seemed to ripple. The Krell soldiers staggered, their armor sparking and twitching. Alarms began to blare throughout the ship, and the lighting flickered ominously. "It's working," Zira exclaimed, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and hope. "The power core is destabilizing." But their victory was far from assured. The Krell, though staggered, were rallying. And the destabilizing core meant the entire ship could become a death trap at any moment. "Back to the ship," Elias ordered. We need to get out of here before this whole place blows. They ran for their craft, ducking energy blasts from the recovering Krell soldiers. Sarah had the engines fired up before they were even all aboard, and they shot out of the docking bay as explosions began to rock the mothership. As they sped away, the sight behind them was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The Krell mothership was breaking apart, huge chunks of alien metal tearing away as the overloaded power core reached critical mass. And it wasn't just the mothership. All across the sky, other Krell ships were suffering the same fate, their linked power systems falling like cosmic dominoes. We did it, Maya breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. We actually did it. But their celebration was premature. A massive shock wave from the exploding mothership caught their small craft, sending it spinning out of control. Warning alarms blared as they plummeted towards the Earth. "Hang on," Sarah yelled, fighting with the controls. "This is going to be rough." Elias reached out, finding Zyra's hand in the chaos. Their eyes met, a lifetime of feelings passing between them in an instant. If this was the end, at least they were together. The ground rushed up to meet them, and then everything went black. Elias awoke to the sound of birdsong and the feeling of a gentle breeze on his face. For a moment, he thought he must be dead. Then the pain hit, and he knew he was very much alive. He opened his eyes to find himself lying in a field, the wreckage of their craft scattered around him. And there, sitting beside him with a relieved smile on her face, was Zyra. "Welcome back," she said softly. As Elias sat up, wincing at his injuries, he saw the rest of their team. Battered and bruised, but alive. And in the sky above them, where once Krell ships had loomed, nothing but clear blue. "We won?" Elias asked, still hardly daring to believe it. Zyra nodded. "We won. The Krell fleet is destroyed. Earth is safe." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The world celebrated its narrow escape, and the team found themselves hailed as heroes. Governments that had once dismissed them now sought their counsel. The existence of extraterrestrial life was now an undeniable fact, and humanity was grappling with its new place in a much larger universe. But for Elias, the most significant change was much more personal. As the dust settled and the world began to look towards the future, he found himself facing a decision he never thought he'd have to make. "My people will be looking for me," Zyra said one evening, as they stood watching the sunset from the roof of their old hideout. "Now that the Krell are defeated, I should return home, help rebuild." Elias felt his heart constrict. The thought of Zyra leaving was almost unbearable. But he understood her duty, her connection to her own world. "I understand," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You've done so much for Earth. It's time you did something for your own people." Zyra turned to him, her silver-violet eyes shimmering with emotion. "Come with me," she said softly. Elias blinked, taken aback. "What?" "Come with me," Zyra repeated, taking his hands in hers. "Elias, you've opened my eyes to the wonders of your world. Let me show you mine. And perhaps together, we can help bridge the gap between our peoples. Show the galaxy that different species can not only coexist, but thrive together." Elias looked at Zyra, this incredible being who had crashed into his life and changed everything. He thought of the wonders he'd seen, the horrors they'd faced together. He thought of the vast universe out there, filled with countless worlds and civilizations waiting to be discovered. And he thought of the promise of a new adventure with Zyra by his side. His decision, in the end, was easy. "Yes," he said, pulling her close. "Yes, I'll come with you." As they embraced, the first stars of evening began to twinkle in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was Zyra's homeworld, and beyond that, an entire galaxy waiting to be explored. But more than that, those stars represented hope. Hope for a future where different species could learn from each other, support each other, and face any challenge together. Earth had taken its first steps into a larger universe, and Elias and Zyra would be there to help guide the way. The girl no one had believed had not only saved humanity, but opened the door to a brighter future for all. And the man who had believed in her when no one else would have found his place in the cosmos. As night fell on a changed Earth, Elias and Zira looked to the stars, ready for whatever adventures awaited them. Their story, like humanity's journey among the stars, was just beginning.